If you'd like to purchase Magic Online cards at competitive prices, check out our web store at mtgoacademy.com/store.
Welcome to round 1. I'm on the draw sadly, but my hand is really nice. I'm not gonna mulligan, and I don't want to run out Nyxborn Shieldmaid on turn 1, but rather put it on a Crone Skyguard. I think the most likely course of action here is to just drop the Skyguard on 2 and then bestow the Shieldmaid immediately. If my opponent has mana open, then I could play this differently. Given that I'm playing against red, might also just be better to start off with Reckless Reveler. And drawing a Planescape is going to mean that I will be able to protect the Skyguard with an Ajani's Presence. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to run out the Skyguard with Presence backup, and then I'm going to bestow the Shieldmaid also with Presence backup. That way I should be a lot more likely to take over the game with the Skyguard. I'm representing Ajani's Presence here, but I don't really care if my opponent gets a read here. Alright, I'm not gonna block here. I definitely don't want to use my Ajani's Presence. And now I do get to bestow here, which is great. I also have a blocker for Blade Tusk Boar, and the real question is if I want to be attacking this turn. I kind of want to put Observant Outseed on a Crone Skyguard and just take over the game. I also know that against green-red, the protection I need with the Presence isn't really relevant once I put this on there. It's just going to have 7 toughness and be pretty much unbeatable. Now, that said, I'm going to be defensive with the Skyguard one more turn. I think it's going to take over the game against most cards that my opponent could have here. And that way I'm going to have inevitability, not taking any damage, and just making a huge monster. Now, one thing that could happen is that my opponent attacks with everything anyway, so just holding whatever tricks he has. Alright, only the snakes. I'm just gonna take 4 here. This could be a bluff, could be a good bluff, but I'm not gonna risk my Crone Skyguard here, especially given that if I untap with the Ajani's Presence, I'm just gonna be golden. Alright, I can play the Presence for 4 to target the Revelers as well. There's gonna be some snake action going on. I don't have the mana to bestow Spearpoint Aureates, and I could just run out a Crone Skyguards. Doing so does mean that I won't have the mana for the Presence, which is kind of unfortunate, I have to say. Now, I could play Spearpoint Aureates just without bestowing. That would at least mean that Blade Tusk Boar can't attack. And in theory, I could start a double block, which is not really what I want to be doing. So, let's see. I think I have to cast spells here. And the most impact I can get is by casting Reveler and Skyguard, leaving open Ajani's Presence. If necessary, I'm just gonna have to chump block with maybe the small Skyguard. The idea behind this is that if my opponent attacks, then I'm at least getting one of my opponent's creatures. Alright, 4/4. Yep, and my opponent is very aggressive here, which is definitely correct. The question is if my opponent still has a trick to punish me blocking the Snake of the Golden Grove, or if I can actually punish my opponent for being so aggressive here. This is actually interesting. The Crone Skyguard could block the Nessian Cursor, but then I'm forced to cast Ajani's Presence on it, so all my other blocks will just be as they are. I could chump block one of the snakes with a Skyguard, and only... So the problem with the cursor is if I don't block the cursor, it's going to deal me 7. And I don't know if my opponent will use his mana for other means. So yeah, I think actually forcing the issue here is my best bet, and I'm willing to just prevent 4 damage by chump blocking the snake. That way I'm gonna at least deal with the Eidolon long term. Alright. And now if I draw a land, I can put Spearpan Aureate on Reckless Reveler and have 2 huge monsters for my opponent. Alright, that didn't really work out. Now my plan is going to be to attack with this, stay alive, and draw a land for Spearpan Aureate for the win. Looking at this, what I could actually do would be to attack with both, to threaten an attack for 9, and then I'm just gonna block with Ill-Tempered Cyclops and a Crone Skyguard, and my Crone Skyguard is gonna be lethal on its own. It has 8 toughness now, so it's quite unlikely that my opponent will have something to kill it if I block with it. Yeah, this is actually interesting. I think my opponent can't really afford to block here with the Eidolon, and if he does, I'm also happy because it's gone. That way I'm not reliant on drawing a land next turn. And of course if my opponent blocks, then that's fine as well. In a sense my opponent should block, because I could have also always left this back to just block, but let's see if that works out as I wanted it to. Clearly with 3 cards in my opponent's hand, there is cards that kill me, but alright, Bolt of Kuranos. Bottom. I don't think that's lethal. No. It's close, but it's not lethal. So I lose to Titan Strength here, but that's pretty much the only card. Now I have created a lethal Crone Skyguard, which wouldn't have been guaranteed if I hadn't dealt 2 with the Reckless Reveler. I could have played this more defensively and probably won as well, but needing 1 more turn to win is kind of a scary proposition. Alright, that worked out very nicely, and I'm looking at Death by Later and all the 4/4s that my opponent is running, so I'm not really interested in having that. Deserter's Quarters is an option. Even Laguna Band Trailblazer doesn't look bad. It's quite easy to make it a bit larger than 4 toughness, and that could be just what I need in this matchup. I think this is a good change, and I'm happy with pretty much everything else. I want to keep my deck as close to its original form as possible. Now this doesn't seem amazing, but it's a 3 power creature for 4. I don't think you can really go too wrong on that. Alright, I think this is what I want to run. And I'm on the draw, of course. My opponent mulligans to 6. So I need at least 1 Plains in this hand to get going. I still have the Archetype, which is uncastable. I think this wouldn't be an unreasonable keep, but I'm gonna mulligan. I think my deck is better than trying to just, well, hope to draw the right lands. I'm gonna keep these 6 here. They still need a Plains, but if I draw that, oh well, there it is. So, not a great hand, to be sure. My opponent also mulligans, so I'm hopeful that things will work out. Let's see. Maybe. Okay, just an Opaline Unicorn. So now I expect the 4/4s to come down for my opponent starting next turn. And it would be great for me to draw something here. to cast on turn 4. I have a lot of 4-drops, so that's not unreasonable. Alright, that's pretty huge. And Ajani's Presence is just a bit too weak to help here. So that might be a big problem. The Pulse Crusher also turns into a 6/6 and just eats my archetype. Yeah, that's not good. That's definitely not good. I am representing Divine Verdict here, but my opponent definitely doesn't have to respect that. It's possible that the Pulse Crusher isn't being monstrous. I think that would be a reasonable line from my opponent, yeah. Alright, Ember Swallower as well. Nice. And a Bronze Sable. I can deal with the Bronze Sable. Let's say that. I can say that much. Alright, this is threatening to take my land, so I might just have to run out a Chrome Conscriptor. Oh, that would have been a great play last turn. So, because the Conscriptor is threatening my lands, I might have to get it into play as soon as possible so that I can start threatening to take my opponent's creatures while making my Conscriptor large. I could also play the Supply Line Cranes and make it 3/5, but I can't block Pulse Crusher and I couldn't block Ember Swallower if my opponent had a land. So, not sure if I can really win if my opponent has the land, because Ember Swallower is just so huge. What I could do here is just play a Crone Mastiff holding up Ajani's Presence, and then maybe if my opponent doesn't draw a land, I could actually take the Ember Swallower out with the help of Ajani's Presence. But if my opponent has the land, I'm down to 2 lands, 3 after I play 1. I have the Mastiff, but I'm just dying to whatever my opponent does. I think a Chrome Conscriptor is my only hope here. And I still have the first strike, the 5-power first strike. So if my opponent doesn't have a land to monsterify the Swallower, I would have been threatening to kill it on offense. Now that's not going to happen. So yeah, I don't think I can block here. The problem is it's going to be bad either way. But if I block the Ember Swallow, my opponent monstrifies it. I can only block the Pulse Crusher with the Conscriptor, and now I'm getting monstrous with one of these two, and both are going to be pretty awful for me. I expect the Pulse Crusher to turn into a 6/6 because that takes care of Archetype of Courage. I'm going down to 6, so I'm almost dead. Yep. Oh yeah, actually a 7/7 even. Crone Skyguard a bit late to the party. So what are my options here? I want to take control of one of these creatures with the Chrome Conscriptor, and then I will kill the creature my opponent attacks with. So the Ajani's Presence at least allows me to kill one of my opponent's creatures. Maybe it's going to be his choice, but it's still going to be good. And that probably means that I want a Crone Mastiff in play to deal with the other one. My creatures aren't large enough to really fight with what my opponent is doing. Alright, Pulse Crusher is attacking alone as a 7/7. So my line is going to take Ember Swallower and block with that and the Conscriptor. And a Lightning Strike as well. That's not good. Sadly, the Swallower isn't an enchantment. That would be good. Well, the Swallower goes down anyway, but Now at least I've dealt with Ember Swallower. I go down to 3 and I'm alive. So let's see. Ill-Tempered Cyclops, so basically another 6/6 to worry about. Yep, that's pretty much game. I can play Supply Line Cranes. It's gonna be up to a 3/5 blocker. I can tap down the Polis Crusher, but then I'm dead to my opponent's attack. So I'm just gonna concede here. That was a bit too powerful on a mulligan. Ferrous Warden is a card I'm happy not to have. Laguna Band Trailblazer is a card I'm very happy to have. So the real problem is that these huge cards are just very unbeatable for me. So I'm gonna try to run a Deserter's Quarters to have a chance to lock at least one of them down if the game goes longer. I think the Iconoclast is also a card that I should cut. It just doesn't brawl with the fatties very well, and this is all about tempo, and that way I will have the best shot at that. I'm gonna try to go first here. I like this hand. Also not unhappy to see the quarters here. Hopefully my opponent doesn't have super quick start. At some point the ground is going to be heavily in my opponent's favor. I can almost not do much about that. So here the question is how aggressive I want to be with the Hoplite. Do I offer the trade or not? Now my opponent could just take it. The problem is I don't have a follow-up. I only have the Ill-Tempered Cyclops to at some point dominate the Reveler, but I'm not sure if I want to be taking extra damage if I don't have to with this hand. I think I'll try to block if my opponent attacks. And if my opponent wants to kill these other Quarters with Reckless Reveler, I'm also fine with that. Okay. So now I'm going to attack. I prevented 2 damage to me, basically, by not attacking last turn. What my opponent can do here is kill these other Quarters, but opts not to, so just gonna curve out here. And then hopefully, well, potentially just put a counter on the Cyclops if that is something that would help me here. Depends on the size of my opponent's creature, of course. Alright, it's Snake of the Golden Glove. I'm still not going to put counters on there. It's going to be a 4/4. And now it's actually better to make the Supply Line Cranes 3/5 so that it can already block. And then the Ill-Tempered Cyclops is going to be large enough to block the snake once I monsterify it. And if I draw a 6th land, then I also have Deserter's Quarters available. Now this is weak to combat tricks, of course. And there my opponent attacks. So the safest line here is to just take 4 damage, not to expose my Supply Line Cranes. And a double block would be the alternative. I think only blocking with Supply Line Cranes makes it too easy for my opponent to get somewhere. If I double block, my opponent can just trade with Ill-Tempered Cyclops without investing a trick. Now, if I block with both and my opponent has Lightning Strike on the Cyclops, then my Supply Line Cranes is still fine. Yeah, all of these things just seem pretty dangerous. I'm just gonna take 4 damage here. And then hopefully I will have maybe the 6th land to monsterify the Cyclops. And if not, I'm just gonna run out my hand. Maybe I draw Observant Outseed, which would be great in this spot. And I kind of have to hope that my opponent just doesn't run out Insane Fatty after Insane Fatty. Alright, I drew Mortal's Ardor, so that's a start. We'll make the Supply Line Cranes a lot stronger. And also maybe I just want my cheap creatures in play now, keep up Mortal's Ardor, have everything on blocking duty, and then we'll see what happens when I try to block next turn. Scouring Sands. Scouring Sands. That's not good for me. So I can cast Mortal's Ardor to make my Skyguard a 3/3 with lifelink. I can just allow this to happen. And then I try to block the snake and just try to Mortal's Ardor. I think that's probably my best bet, hoping that my opponent doesn't have another trick. Yeah, this is a beating. The problem here, of course, being that now my Supply Line Cranes dies from blocking the Snake of the Golden Grove. And I will still try to double block, I think. It makes a lot of sense if I want to draw another trick from... Well, no, it doesn't make a lot of sense if I don't want my creature to die. If my opponent just puts the Ill-Tempered Cyclops first, then I'm trading here, which isn't really what I want to be doing. So I think I have to go for it. I have to try the Mortal's Ardor here. And if it doesn't work, then, well, that's bad. But I think the Scouring Sands is what my opponent had last turn already. It would make perfect sense to attack with your snake into my 3/5 if you're holding Scouring Sands. And now that I know that, it would have actually been good to block. But I had no idea that it was a Scouring Sands that was coming. Alright, I'm getting a 3/5 here. I have a bit of a problem against Cyclops of One-Eyed Past, ironically. But this is going to be a lot better once I draw my 6th land. So I think I just stay on defense here, trade Ill-Tempered Cyclops for my opponent's Cyclops, block the 4/4 with my 3/5, and then I'm happy to draw a land for 100-handed one. And to make Deserter's Quarters live as well. And I can't take 5 damage here, I think. I think that wouldn't be reasonable. There is Ember Swallower with 6 lands. So now I really need to draw my land before my opponent monstrifies the Swallower. There it is. So that worked out. Now I have a 6/8 potentially. Now 8 toughness is not good if my opponent just double blocks. I could... Well, no, that doesn't make sense. I mean, a 6/8 just stops everything that my opponent is doing. I don't think I have to do that particularly quickly. I could actually attack with Supply Line Cranes. If my opponent attacks with more than the Swallower, I'm just blocking everything else. And if not, I'm also happy. So yeah, let's get in for 3 here. I need to be dealing some damage. In a sense, my opponent wants to monstrify the Swallower, but it also doesn't really help him too much. If it's only the Swallower, I'm just blocking with the 100-handed one. And then I'm, of course, monstrosing so that it doesn't die to Lightning Strike. Oh, it looks like my opponent's just going for it. Don't know why. Well, maybe there's something else coming, but let's just see what happens. I'm gonna keep 2 Plains and 1 Mountain so that I can still cast my double white spells. If my opponent doesn't have anything else here, this attack didn't really make sense, because I will be able to attack with 100-handed one and the Supply Line Cranes if I want to, whereas my opponent didn't deal any damage and lost the Hedonist and the Swallower. This is quite the game. Alright, 1, 2, 3, and nothing else happened. Right, I draw a land, which I'm going to play anyway. Can just run it out there. I'm going to take my chances here. If my opponent wants to attack with more than the Swallower, I'm just going to try to eat one of his creatures. And I don't think that holding back the Supply Line Cranes is what I want to be doing in this spot. holding back the supply line cranes would be good if I wanted to double block the Swallower to play around Lightning Strike. So yeah, my opponent is attacking here, which of course makes sense. One thing I could do here is just not block for one turn and then hold back the supply line cranes if I'm really scared about a Lightning Strike. If my opponent Lightning Strikes, I'm kind of losing the game. So maybe the attack with the supply line cranes was not something that I could afford. I'm gonna not block here. I'm regretting the attack with the supply line cranes now. But that way I will have more time to draw into relevant cards. And even lands aren't completely irrelevant, so... Opponent not blocking anything. Now the big question is what is happening in this attack step. It's only the Ember Swallower again. I'm gonna try the double block now. $110 is the first choice, so I think that's gonna mean a Lightning Strike, which I played around by not blocking last turn. Okay, Bowl of Crown is pretty much the same thing. Now at least I'm live to draw whatever I want. Observe and Outseed would be great. Land would also be fine. It's a land, so I have the Deserter's Quarters live. So I can attack for 3. My opponent can attack back for 4. And might also play something. Card put on the bottom at least. So I don't think I should be aggressive here. I have 6 mana, I have Deserter's Quarters, and I have a 3/5 blocker. I also have at least 2 very nice bestow cards to draw. That would also mean that my clock is then only going to be 2 turns rather than 4. I kind of have to hope that my opponent doesn't draw something insane. Yeah, Pulse Crusher is pretty good. So my opponent will not have 6 mana next turn, which means that I could afford to not untap Deserter's Quarters this turn so that I can draw something relevant. I'm gonna leave it tapped here. Draw a land, which is not what I wanted to see. Just gonna hold that and pass the turn. So now Pulse Crusher could attack. I'm forced to block here. Don't think I can afford to do anything else. This is aggressive, but it does mean that I'm just gonna block Nesting Cursor. And there is an Explosion Shield made. So now I have Deserter's Quarters available. I could also just play a 1/2 blocker. Yeah, I think that's what I need in this spot. And of course I'm gonna tap down the Pulse Crusher before it could attack me. And then I'm just hoping to draw into one of my bestow cards. Snake is attacking. Voyaging Satyr is attacking. Interesting. So the block that's the most reasonable here is to double block the Snake of the Golden Grove, and then I'm dead to Lightning Strike. Now, if my opponent doesn't have a trick, then I'm actually getting a huge exchange out of the deal, which makes me think that my opponent probably has the Lightning Strike. So there is a way to play around Lightning Strike, which means that I have to block Voyaging Satyr with Supply Line Cranes, chump block Snake of the Golden Grove with Nyxborn Shieldmate, and then I'll have more time to draw into cards that matter. So my read here is that I'm just dead to Lightning Strike the way my opponent is attacking. If my opponent wouldn't have the Lightning Strike, then attacking with Snake of the Golden Grove would leave me with Supply Line Cranes on 3 life, and I have Nyxborn Shield. I have both my creatures. No, I've only Supply Line Cranes. My opponent has only Voyaging Satyr, so the trade would actually be dealing 1 damage, and I'm losing only Nyxborn Shieldmate, while my opponent is losing Snake of the Golden Grove. This attack doesn't make sense if you aren't holding a good trick. So I think I have to play around a trick here. Now, of course, my opponent could have realized exactly the same thing, and it wasn't a bluff. But I still think that I had to play it that way. I'm gonna leave these other quarters tapped because I can't beat Police Crusher, and I need to draw a bestow card here or a blocker. All right, Nyxborn Rolliker. So that at least allows me to play to beat a Lightning Strike. And let me think. If I put the Nyxborn Rolliker on here, it kills the Snake. So yeah, that's the best line against Lightning Strike. And now if my opponent doesn't have the Lightning Strike, I at least gain parity. Well, it's actually a good trade. I trade Snake of the Golden Grove for Supply Line Cranes and the Lightning Strike when my opponent has to use. Ajani's Presence, that's also a great draw. It's not good enough to win the game here, but I'm at least still alive. Now, one thing that could be a problem... Oh wait, what's not? Okay, Police Crusher is monsterifying, that's fine. One thing that could be a problem is if I don't draw a creature. My opponent does, I might just be dead. Alright, so far so good. Creature. It's not a creature, it's a land. So yeah, I can't threaten lethal, I can't do anything, I have to wait and see what happens. This is very scary. If my opponent has any creature and really has the Lightning Strike, I'm just gonna die to that. Bolt of Crown is targeting me. Now I'm dead to Lightning Strike. Puts a card on top even. No place. I think it's just gonna be Lightning Strike and I'm dead. I played around that Lightning Strike the whole game basically. And now I think it's punishing me. No, it's not really punishing me. I think I played around it and my opponent had it the whole time. But because my opponent drew another burn spell, I couldn't beat it now. So I made the right block. I tried to draw one of my outs to actually win the race against the Snake. Ajani's Presence was close, but not enough. Mortal's Ardor would have been enough, for example. Then I just Mortal's Ardor the Supply Line Cranes and I'm out of burn range. But here, my opponent just had a Bowl of Karanos too many. So, yeah. This is the end of a very exciting match. Sadly, not in our favor, but I think that yeah, I think that the block, the read was correct, that my opponent had to hold a 3 damage burn spell, and I was quite certain that it had to be Lightning Strike, or that it would be Lightning Strike, and by keeping around my Supply Line Cranes on defense, I had a good shot of just beating that Lightning Strike. If I draw the Observant Alcid instead of the Nyxborn Rolliker, then I just attack for 5, threaten lethal, and force my opponent to burn the cranes rather than me. But sadly that didn't quite work out. Alright, first round loss, but a very interesting match, and I think a nice draft deck as well. I'm very happy with how my deck played out. I'm also not ashamed of losing to what my opponent did here. The Scouring Sands were got me good. Also didn't really expect that to happen. It's not really a card that I tend to play around. Interesting drafting decisions with the blue-red first pick and then moving into blue, red and white cards with the white signals just flowing. And then I think ending up with a very solid white-red deck. Showcasing how I like to draft these decks with, of course, Heroic, and then valuing Strife cards quite highly. Alright, that was Simon Godson recording Simon Says for mtgoacademy.com. See you next time when we hopefully win more matches. Bye bye.